everyone, it's Tara. Welcome back to my channel, Tara Talks Books, where we talk everything bookish. So today I'm going to be doing a wrap up. It's actually going to be for July and August. I just didn't get around to filming my July wrap up, so I combined them for this month. So if you want to see what I read during the months of July and August, just keep watching. The first book I read in July is Wicked in His Arms by Stacey Reed. This is a historical romance, and I did read this one via audiobook. I did end up giving this one a 4-star. This is the second book in the Wedded by Scandal series. It follows Lady Olivia Sherwood, who has a family scandal in her past and is considered unconventional for the time. She is sent to the Earl of Blade's estate to get lessons from his mother so she can make a marriage match this season. The Earl of Blade, Tobias Walcott, exercises rigid self-control, so Lady Olivia is like the last person he would wed, but they are found in a closet together. So honor demands they wed, and it goes from there. I loved Lady Olivia's personality. She was bold and unapologetic about who she was as a person. I feel like Tobias will not be a hero for every reader, but I understood like his firmness in his self-control was driven by fear of what he saw in his upbringing. So I liked him as a hero, but I feel like some people might think he's a little bit overbearing, but again, I enjoyed him. I absolutely loved how the grand gesture at the end of the book was so cute and creative. I don't want to give away any like spoilers, but that grand gesture was lovely and it was amazing. I definitely was like, if she does not go back to him, I will. So the tropes in this one is marriage of convenience and a bit of like opposites attract. The next one I read is Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is like a contemporary romance. I did end up reading this one on audiobook and giving this one a 4-star. So this follows Bea, who is a scientist that is offered like a dream project at NASA as a lead on a neuroengineering project. But the catch is she has to co-lead with Levi, who is like her nemesis from grad school. However, when things start going missing, like equipment and staff ignore her, she finds an ally in Levi and it goes from there. So this was a cute rom-com with a bit of action at the end. I enjoyed the STEM representation in this book. The science was actually very interesting and I liked Bea. She's fun and quirky, and Levi is definitely a cinnamon roll hero. I really enjoyed Bea's RA as well. She was entertaining. And if you can't get behind the miscommunication aspect, this may not be for you because it does rely heavily on miscommunication and just like kind of like not talking to each other. I did end up giving it a 4-star and enjoying it overall. So the tropes in this one are actually workplace. They do have to work together. It is forced proximity because of that, and it is grumpy sunshine as well. Next book I read is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. It's a contemporary romance. I did read it physically, and I did end up giving it a 4-star. This follows Ava, a single mom and best-selling author that's under a lot of pressure lately. And then it also follows Shane Hall, who is like a reclusive literary author that is well loved, and him and Ava attend a literary event where they hit it off, but unbeknownst to everyone else, they knew each other in high school and have been writing to each other ever since. And so this is a very emotional book that deals heavily with past trauma. I enjoyed Ava and Shane's love story. What kept it off being a 5-star for me was that I felt that Shane's addiction, almost like he was staying, almost like he quit being addicted for Ava, and I feel like that's just not a good representation in regards to addiction. But I mean, everybody's different and they're going to perceive this differently. So yeah, I couldn't give it a 5-star because of that. But overall, like I said, they do have a lovely, story, but it's basically revolves around trauma as they were children. So their initial meeting, they were both in places where they needed some serious help. And now they're obviously in better places as adults. And the tropes are second chance romance and single parent. The next book is The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi. This is by Shannon Chakraborty, and this is a fantasy. And I did end up listening to this one on audiobook, and I did end up giving it a 4-star as well. So this follows Amina al-Sarafi. She is a retired notorious pirate captain who has survived many adventures on the high seas. However, she is tracked down by the wealthy mother of a former crewman, and she's offered a job to return her comrade's daughter for a generous sum of money. So she almost can't turn it down. So what seems like easy money for this former pirate captain turns into more than she bargained for, but power and glory obviously comes with a price. And so the story goes from there. I enjoyed Amina and all of her crew. I loved the themes of motherhood and women in a man's world, since she is a pirate captain. So she's a woman who had to get people, to follow her and listen to her on a pirate ship. So I really enjoyed that aspect. I really enjoyed that it would go back and forth too from past and the present, where she was kind of telling her story to like a scribe. And so she would kind of like cut in as the scribe is trying to tell things. And so I thought that was a unique aspect to a book, and I really enjoyed it. The last book I read in July is Where Dreams Begin by Lisa Kleypas. This is historical romance, and I did listen to this one on audiobook, and I did end up giving this one a 4.5-star. So Zachary Bronson has gained wealth and power, but is seeking a wife to gain an entry into the ton. Lady Holly Taylor has been in mourning for 3 years after the death of her husband. She ends up attending a party for the first time, and when she goes to get some air out on the balcony, she is mistaken by a mystery man as someone else at first. It ends up being Zachary, and he ends up asking Lady Holly to be his guide into polite society for a year. He ends up offering her a job, and she does end up taking it, and it goes from there. I enjoyed that this book showed how Holly's love for her late husband and for Zachary were different, but still important to who she was. I loved how he fell first. I loved too how Holly formed a relationship with his sister and then ultimately his mother as well. I also just love the relationship between Holly's daughter and Zachary. It just was a lovely story and another good one from Lisa Kleypas. So the tropes in this one are obviously single parent, forced proximity, and there is class difference because, again, Zachary, although is wealthy, is not part of the society or the ton. So, and she is. So obviously that's why he hires her to kind of help his sister as well as him gain entry into the ton. The next few books are from August, and the first one is Hot Earl Summer by Erica Ridley. This is a historical romance that I actually read as an e-arc over on NetGalley, and this one I did end up giving a 4.5-star. This is the 5th book in the Wild Winchester series, but honestly I read it as a standalone because I had not read any of the Wild Winchester's previous books, so it can be read as a standalone, but I do think you miss a bit of the sibling, the backgrounds from the siblings, because it does follow a family. So I definitely want to go back and read the rest of them because I did enjoy the family so much. So this one actually follows Elizabeth Winchester, and she is a bold, curvy, swashbuckling heroine. The Winchesters get a case, and Elizabeth heads to the Earl of Densmore's castle expecting him, but instead she finds Stephen, the Earl's cousin and inventor, locked inside the castle. An enemy attacks the castle, and they must work together to defend it so that it gets to the rightful owner. So this book made me laugh out loud so many times. I just really loved how funny it was. I loved Elizabeth. She was just so unapologetically herself, but could also be vulnerable at times. I loved the chemistry between Elizabeth and Stephen. And it was very much almost immediate. There was definitely that attraction there, but it obviously built throughout the story, and I enjoyed that aspect. I also loved how like they both felt that they had to safeguard their hearts from others since they both had been let down before by their loved ones. So there's definitely like some things that happen to Elizabeth, and then there's things that happen to Stephen, and they both feel like in their past that they have to safeguard their hearts from like other people because they just don't want to be hurt in that way again. And I really liked that like kind of mirrored each other. I enjoyed the action and all of Stephen's inventions. They were such a fun aspect to the book. I loved that there was also disability representation. Elizabeth has like chronic pain, and that is a very big aspect of the book. And I really like how she kind of like shows it. She's like, I'm never fully 100% Elizabeth because of this chronic pain she deals with. So she's like, I'm 50%, I'm 80%, and Stephen's just like, well, wow, if she was 100% herself, what would she be? Because she's a force to be reckoned with at 50%. So I just really like that he saw her too. Tropes in this one are cinnamon roll hero. Stephen is 100% a cinnamon roll hero. The next book I read is The Honey Witch by Sydney J. Shields. This was a fantasy, and I read it via audio, and I actually read it because it was a Black Hat Book Coven pick for the month of July, but unfortunately my library didn't get it till August, so I did end up still listening to it. And I ended up giving this one a 3-star. So this is a cozy sapphic fantasy romance. It follows Marigold, who finds out she's a witch, and her grandmother whisks her off to Innisfree to train her to be the next honey witch. One catch to being a honey witch is that they can never fall in love. So Lottie Burke is another character, and she is a skeptic who doesn't believe in magic in the town of like the small town that's near Innisfree. And Marigold wants to prove to her that magic is real. However, dark magic awakens and threatens to destroy her home and rip her of her magic. So it kind of goes from there. And it is her and Lottie's like love story as well. So obviously there are repercussions because honey witches cannot fall in love. This was very cozy, and I enjoyed the small village of Innisfree. I love the brief moments we got with Marigold and her grandmother. I love the relationship she ended up having with some townspeople, and that ended up being her friends. This does have some trigger warnings. I might be missing some, but definitely death of a loved one. And then fire and burns is very, a scene occurs both in the beginning of the book and the end of the book that has that. The next one is actually a reread for me, and that one is Secrets of a Summer Night by Lisa Kleypas. I love this book. The first round, I read this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, something like that. And I gave it a 4-star. And this round, I'm giving it a 5-star. I ended up listening to this one on audiobook as well as following along on the physical book because there are differences. The audiobook was rewritten at one point, I don't know when, but it was rewritten, and so it is different from the original publication. And so that was very interesting to see. But without further ado, let me show you the step back before I go any farther because yes, how could I not, right? Stunning. We love Annabelle and Simon. So anyways, this follows the Wallflowers. This is the first glimpse into the Wallflowers series. And this one follows Annabelle Payton, and she is part of the ton. However, her father has passed away and basically left them with no money. And so she has to make a match, and she has to make a match quick with somebody who has some money. And unfortunately, nobody really wants to. She's considered a wallflower. She doesn't have a dowry. So nobody really wants to wed her. They all want her as a mistress, but none of them want to wed her. And so that obviously causes a problem. She does not want to be a mistress. And so she kind of devises, she meets the Wallflowers. This is where you get to meet all the Wallflowers, and they meet in Annabelle's book. And I just loved their meeting because it seemed just very real. It's a bunch of women. in the background of society, just hanging out on a wall, and then somebody says something and a conversation starts. And I'm like, that just seems so real to me, especially since I'm shy at first. And then somebody has to talk to me, and then I'll talk back. So I felt that that was very real. But anyways, so it goes from there. The wallflowers kind of have to work together. They decide to work together to find each other husbands. And they start with Annabelle because she's the oldest. And Simon is a bit in the periphery. He is a self made man. So he is not a titled man, but he is self made and is wealthy. And at first, he wants Annabelle as like his mistress. He's waiting, like all the other guys, for her to like call it quits and be somebody's mistress. But it does not go there. He ends up absolutely falling so deeply in love with Annabelle. And I just love it. I love it so much. I love how he caretakes for her. Like there's a caretaking scene when she's sick. I love that he like secretly buys her boots, and like he says that they're not from him because she can't accept a gift from a man that she's not married to. That is not okay back in that time. And so he's like, no, I didn't buy him, but she knows. And like just the thought that goes into everything that he does for her, and their chess game. Oh my goodness, I love their chess game. That's a big part of the book. So I loved like the forced proximity because they're at a like party at Stony Cross Park, and I just love how much like banter they have back and forth as well. And I love that he notices she's trying to ensnare somebody else, obviously because she has to wed, and he just knows that that person isn't right for her, that their personalities won't mesh, and eventually they'll kind of just like tear each other down in marriage. And he's like, you know, he knows that about her, and he sees that and recognizes it, and just goes to show how much he pays attention to who she is. And I just loved it so much. Again, it's a 5-star, one of my favorites in the series, likely my second favorite. I love Devil in Winter, but I'm going to do a reread and we'll see. The next one I read is Her Ruthless Duke by Scarlett Scott. This is a historical romance. I did end up reading this one via audiobook, and I did end up giving this one like a 4.5-star. This was actually our first book club pick for B and I's historical romance book club called Tea and Biscuits with Tara and Bea, and it was so much fun. I loved reading this as a group for the book club. So anyways, this follows Trevor Hunt, the Duke of Ridgely, a former spy that due to unforeseen circumstances becomes the guardian of Lady Virtue Walcott, the daughter of his late friend. Ever since Virtue comes, she pushes his buttons, and Trevor wants nothing more to see her married off as quick as possible. He is like, she's under my hair, I gotta get her gone. However, he can't seem to stay away from the quick-witted Virtue, and it goes from there. I loved how there was so much tenderness in this book. I loved how in tune the characters were with each other. I loved how Virtue enjoyed books, and to punish her for writing unchaperoned, he takes them away, which leads to a very fun scene in his bedchamber. I loved it. It was great. I also like how he gives her a book that was inappropriate for an unmarried woman, but gives it to her after they are married, and they kind of reenact a scene in it. And I just loved that. That was so amazing. There's just so much tenderness in the spicy scenes as well. And their banter back and forth is just so good. And this one is so lovely. The tropes in this one are age gap. I believe he's like 10 years older than her, I want to say. And then he is her ward. So there's a bit of like forbiddenness to it. So this one is just so good, and I definitely enjoy Scarlett Scott's books. The next one I read is Good Duke Gone Wild by Bethany Bennett. This is a historical romance, and I did read it as an e-arc over on NetGalley, and I did end up giving this one a 4-star. So this follows Caroline Danvers, and she is forced out of her home by her vicar father because he discovers she has been writing erotic novels under a pen name. Forced to seek out the only family she has left, she makes her way to her aunt, uncle, and cousin's bookshop. She continues to write and work at the bookshop where she meets Dorian Whitaker, Duke of Holland, a widower who needs an heir. So she is attracted to him, so she like inadvertently writes him or is like inspiration in one of her books, in her most recent book, and he ends up actually hiring her to sell off his late wife's book collection. And within that book collection, she finds something which creates a bit of a mystery, and they kind of have to work together to solve it and come find the truth. And this is more of like a modern take on historical romance, but I love that one that Caroline is an author and that he is just smitten with her at first sight. I love how at first both characters seem like reserved, but he tells her to let him into the pause. And I just love that so much. He's like, let me in, let me see like your thoughts. Because she would like pause and say something, not necessarily what she was thinking. And he's like, no, let me in. And I love that. That was such a neat aspect to the book because it comes up more than once. He tells her to do that, and then he does that for her as well. So I just love that aspect. I also enjoyed the mystery subplot. So the tropes in this one are class difference and forced proximity. The last book I read during the month of August was The Push by Ashley Audrain. I did end up picking this one from my 24 books in 2024 jar. This is a psychological thriller. I did end up reading this one on audiobook, and I did end up giving it a 4-star. So this follows Blythe, and she is determined to be a warm and loving mother, especially since she wants her baby Violet to experience what she never had growing up. In the early days of motherhood, Blythe is convinced something is wrong with Violet because she isn't acting like other children. Her husband thinks it's all in her head, and Blythe ends up, a few years go by, and Blythe ends up getting pregnant with her son, and all seems well until tragedy strikes. And I really disliked Blythe's husband, Fox, in this book. I felt he didn't support her and wanted her to be someone she was not. But I think it was made, like his character was made to be that way. So I didn't take a star off because of that. But I definitely need people to know that I did not like him. I felt he didn't listen to her fears or concerns, and she starts to question her own sanity because of it. Like, is there something wrong with my daughter, or is it me? Like, what's going on? Am I crazy? And I'm just like, that is not helpful to a new mother. So this one definitely took me for a ride because you're like thinking, is it generational trauma? Is it postpartum depression, or is this real? And it definitely goes through the gamut of things. Like, I'm like, what is happening in this book? So if you like a wild ride, but like a slow wild ride when you're trying to figure out like what is going on, definitely check this one. I loved also that this book looked into like the harsher side of motherhood, because sometimes motherhood can be portrayed as easy or rainbows and sunshine, and sometimes there are days and there are moments that are not all rainbows and sunshine, and motherhood can be difficult. And so I love that this kind of showed that as well in this book. So I don't know what to think about that ending. I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna end it like that. So if you don't like a cliffhanger or like an abrupt ending, maybe don't check it out. But I ended up giving it a 4-star. So those are all the books that I read during the months of July and August. Let me know if you've read any of them and your thoughts in the comments below. If you don't feel like commenting anything but you want to leave me a message, just leave me a book stack emoji in the comments. Like and subscribe if you'd like to. Bye!